My name is Lorian Charles, and this is a summary of my presentation, Addressing Implicit Bias in Schools, a case study exploring educators' responses to an implicit bias training program. The best place to begin a discussion on implicit bias is with the definition. Godsill defined implicit bias as the automatic association of stereotypes or attitudes with particular social groups. These tend to be negative. The attitudes and stereotypes tend to be negative, and therefore implicit bias is considered negative, especially in the context of this study. It's also important to notice that implicit biases do not always align with an individual's explicit beliefs or intentions, so one may say he or she believes one way, but actions demonstrate a completely different set of beliefs. Actions and words don't always line up. It's important to study implicit bias in the context of education because of its potential to make teachers complicit in discrimination. Discrimination has been tied to harsher discipline practices, fewer recommendations for academically challenging courses, and/or poor achievement among those in the discriminated against groups. Data support disparities in females in STEM courses and discipline for males and minorities, and placement in academically challenging courses for minorities. These disparities could be caused by discrimination, and the discrimination could be caused by implicit bias. For that reason, it's important to explore implicit bias in an educational setting. The most important finding is that implicit bias behaviors can be changed. And that idea formed the foundation of my study because I sought to find how effectively certain activities changed behaviors. My literature review focused on how to change biased behaviors, and I found that a three-pronged approach was most successful. Prong 1 is awareness of personal biases. Prong 2 is education about what implicit bias is. Prong 3 is training about how to mitigate the effects of implicit bias. There was no particular order, but the most effective studies for reducing implicit bias had all three of those components. Lastly, research showed that this information should be delivered in a safe, supportive environment, and it should be emphasized that everyone has implicit biases. So here's a paraphrase of the guiding questions that I sought to answer with my study. 1, did the program change behaviors? Why or why not? What were the changes in behavior? Did the program change beliefs? What caused the change in beliefs? So the whole design of my study was that I would create an implicit bias training program, and then I would use a qualitative ethnographic collective case study design to find out how teachers felt about the effectiveness of that training module. I felt the qualitative method was better than the quantitative because it allowed for open-ended questions so that I could explore teachers' feelings. They could tell me what they were feeling and I could categorize it versus the confines of a quantitative research. I felt the collective case study was the best design because I could get multiple perspectives that would allow me to get more insight into the problem. I chose a maximal variation sampling of participants so that I could get a variety of participants. So there was, elementary, secondary, male, female, a diversity of races, diversity of years of experience, all to give me a well-rounded view or insight into the problem so that I could recognize trends among different people. Once I had my participants, I collected data. The data collection was in 3 phases. Phase 1 was an interview in which I got descriptive information from the participants and just built a relationship with them so that they would be willing to share this very personal information with me. Phase two was actual participation in the training modules. So the program for implicit bias awareness, it contained 3 modules that were about 10 to 15 minutes long. After each module, the participants completed a questionnaire with a rating scale and an open-ended question. So most of my analysis took place in that questionnaire where I used Charmez's grounded theory approach for line by line coding and focus coding in order to see what themes developed. Phase three was the focus group meeting in which I clarified and asked follow-up questions regarding the data that I had received previously and where I affirmed that the data I had collected and my interpretation of that data was accurate. I found that implicit bias training impacted participants by raising awareness and increasing introspection. The introspection was considered a positive change because teachers reflected more and they thought more about their actions for the purpose of reducing implicit bias. Participants did not express a change in beliefs as a result of participating in the training program. I found that interesting because the focus group discussion revealed that teachers felt the beliefs weren't necessary to change up front. Teachers expressed that the behaviors were more important to change and that they felt beliefs might follow after their behaviors, but behaviors were most important. Finally, participants expressed affirmation in the value of their training for themselves and the importance of this type of training for others. Why does this even matter? School districts can benefit from a research-based implicit bias training program like the one I used because it's teachers felt good about it. It had positive feelings and it was effective, which means it could possibly be a means of reducing disparities in school data. Also important was the observation that educators can have positive feelings about learning about implicit bias. Talking about bias is often very taboo. People don't want to talk about it. They don't want to be just to feel like they're biased or bigoted in any way. So this kind of created a safe place to discuss the stereotypes so that it can lead to change. Of course, this research had limitations, one being the small number of participants. There were only 4 participants, and all of them did not complete every module of the study. And it's also important to note that implicit bias training is not a magic bullet that will solve all school problems. That takes a variety of behaviors and changes and systematic reviews in order to see dramatic changes in school success. I would recommend that researchers address the following in future research. Are the changes in behavior short-term or long-term? Is the stated change in behavior supported by changes in discipline, achievement, or enrollment data over time? So not just what they say they're doing, but does data support that there are positive changes taking place within the school? Finally, does the delivery method impact the effectiveness of the program? As I mentioned earlier, I delivered 3 digital models, but what if face-to-face is a better method? What if small groups is better method? What if blended is a better model? That is something worth being explored for future research. In closing, I found this to be a very positive learning experience for me. I enjoyed connecting with other teachers, hearing their stories, learning about them and the way they thought. I also learned that it is the valuable lessons in quality research, preparing your data collection tools, making sure you have enough space on enough storage on your recording device, or that everything is lined up so that there are no glitches during the data collection process. I also found this to be a very interesting topic. I would learn more about implicit bias. In fact, I do hope to continue to deepen my learning and learn more about implicit bias as a result of the work that I've done here. I really did feel like I grew personally. I learned so much about myself and about others, and I truly enjoyed the process. And I did not think that I would, but I really did. And so I'm glad that I was able to participate in this study. Finally, these are my references for this presentation, full of rich information. I hope that you'll explore them and learn more about implicit bias yourself. Thank you for your time.